Welcome to the Wall to Wall podcast, brought to you by Wall Ed Tech, where your host, Jared and Carrie Wall's passion for technology and learning come together to bring you up-to-date information on what's going on in and out of the classroom. From the latest apps and best practices to current trends, this podcast is Wall to Wall Ed Tech.
Hi, welcome to episode 5. Today we're going to talk about classroom management in the technology-infused classroom. I love the technology-infused portion of what I just said. So I'm here with Jared, my co-host. How are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you today, Carrie?
I'm doing well.
And for those of you, I know this is radio, so we have to be more descriptive. As I stare across the table now at my co-host, it's a little bit different view this week, and that's because our first show note today is that we are using new podcasting equipment. So Wall Ed Tech has gone semi-professional. Before this, the first 4 episodes, we recorded on a USB mic that sat on the table in front of us, and then we both kind of like talked toward the microphone and hope it picked us up well.
We're sharing.
But it was definitely not very good quality, as you could hear one of us better than the other one, and you could tell that was going on. And so we got our new equipment in, as we mentioned last week, that we would be recording with our new stuff. And we want to talk about what we have chosen to use in case you want to get into podcasting as well. Our mixer, we opted for a sound mixer so we could put our voices together into one unit and then record from that. And so that mixer is by Yamaha. It's the Yamaha MG10, the base model, not the souped up model with the special effects built into the mixer. We just got the base model that lets us plug in up to 6 external lines. 4 of those can be XLR microphone plug-ins, so we can actually connect to the computer and Skype people in at some point if we have guests from the outside world who can't be in the studio. So the mixer is Yamaha MG10, and our microphones are Samson, that's S-A-M-S-O-N, Samson Q2U, which I have to say have a great sound quality. These are sort of an intermediate entry-level XLR podcasting microphone. Nice thing about them is they're XLR, which is like that standard mic you see when people plug in to a regular mic to put on a mic stand. But they're also USB, which means if you're out and you need to plug directly into your computer and use them without the mixer, you can go USB mode on them. But the sound quality is fantastic on these. Also, one day we'll put out a picture, but you'll see we bought a podcasting kit that came with headsets so that we're monitoring what we say and hearing it so we can monitor the quality. We have cables that connect the computer so we can play sound effects if we want to. And we also have boom mic stands that if you've seen a radio studio where the microphone hangs in front of your face, that's kind of the setup we have going on, along with windscreen so you don't hear the spitting and popping noises that are associated with these type of microphones. So that's what we're sporting.
It looks super fancy.
It does.
Very professional.
And somehow we figured out how to work the mixer.
No. You figured out how to work the mixer. Hardware is not my specialty. That is something I definitely would have to do a whole lot of research on and struggle with. But thank goodness you knew what to do with it. So anyway, but yeah, so this week we have our new podcasting equipment, and we've had a busy week this week. We've done some reading and researching and some articles, and we always do our professional development. Like, I feel like that's something we just do every day, something. And of course, being both educators in the house, that's usually the topic of our conversations a lot. In news, ISTE has ended. I hope that you're able to follow the hashtags ISTE 18 or not at ISTE 18. Hopefully you learned something by following those hashtags, or at least something that piqued your interest enough to be able to follow up and do some investigating on your own. I was looking through the hashtag, and everything on my feed for Twitter was ISTE. Everything. Yes, there were very few things that
anybody
were not.
Who was there was posting what they were seeing. There were some interesting booths and presentations going on there. A lot of hands-on makerspace type activities and trainings. And we don't know personally most of the people we follow on Twitter, but it was interesting to see a lot of the information coming back, definitely putting going to ISTE on my list of things to do in the upcoming years, because it looks like a lot of fun.
I also saw a lot of the people who did go, now that they're back home, they have composed basically like all of their stuff that they learned and all of their takeaways, and have compiled it in infographics and things like that, and they're just putting them all out there. So
let's talk about some of the tools and trends we saw coming out of ISTE.
Well, one of the things that kind of caught my attention was this year, our school district, we are starting with the Google Classroom along with Schoology. And one of the things about Google Classroom, now that I'm going to be able to use it, I've been doing a little bit more research, but I saw that they had some updates where they offer a secure browser for quizzes. I don't think it's a complete lockdown browser, but I think it's just something that's supposed to be more secure.
Well, let me step in here. What I read about it is for people who manage, if you're at a school system that uses Chromebooks and you manage those Chromebooks administer those Chromebooks through your district, you can set that feature in Google Classroom to secure the browser, so that when students take quizzes through Google Forms in your Google Classroom, it does keep them from being able to go to any other tabs when they take their quiz. So if you need some way to offer a secure browser for quizzes, this is a step in the right direction. Now, as a teacher who has used other LMSs like Schoology, I know that being able to create a quiz is a big deal. Google Classroom has added that functionality as well. They have given you the ability now to create quizzes using Google Forms directly in your Google Classroom. For those of you who use Google Forms, creating a quiz in Google Forms is it's not the best way to create a quiz, although they're getting better at it, and it will self-grade multiple choice now, and you can add those essay-type short answer questions as well. Never been my favorite quiz maker, Google Forms, but it is offered now in Google Classroom to build it right there in your classroom without having to go to your drive, and to securely offer that quiz without students being able to cheat, but only if your district actually manages those Chromebooks that you're using that on. So just a little caveat there.
Right. One thing I notice about Google, and I'm a fan of Google all the way, but sometimes there's something that it just doesn't do or doesn't do very well, and you could get better. You could do things more with a different program, and you just wait it out, and it's no time that they're on top of it, and they've already made that update and improvement. So
absolutely.
Google
and I'll say another thing about
continuing to grow.
Another thing about Google Classroom, besides the secure browser and making quizzes, is that they listen to educators talk about how difficult it is to navigate the feed.
Right.
Because if you put in an announcement or an activity, all of that stuff went onto this feed on your classroom. And so if I put in an activity today, next week there may be 16 announcements made, and now the activity is off the page at the bottom of the stream. Yeah. And so what they've done is they've given you the ability to organize your activities in folders so that your activities and assignments are separate from your announcements on the feed. So they have made some improvements in that regard as well. Now, another Google item that I found,
this was super cool.
It is. It's super cool. If you haven't played with it, do it. I use an iPhone, but you can do this on Android, of course, with Google. Download the Google Translate app. And as a teacher who's had students who speak English as a second language in my classroom, this is a fantastic thing to know that you'll be able to use this. Also, if you travel and you don't speak the language of the country you're in, maybe something you want to make sure you download and use. The Google Translate app used to be you would type in what you wanted to say or to know, and it would translate it into that other language or into your language. Now, you can use your camera and literally hold your camera up in front of a sign. So if I'm if I'm traveling and I'm in France and the signs are in French and I want to know what this says in English, I set it to French to English, hold my camera up, and magically that word on that sign turns into English right there before my eyes.
It was really cool. We did that with a book cover, and then we turned it open where you had a whole page of text, and it did the same thing. It was super cool.
So if you need some help with translating on the fly, Google Translate with the camera option is fantastic.
Right. Another thing that we found this week, and I don't know where we've been. We try to stay on top of things, but technology changes so much, and we're only two people. But my recent find, and I do realize I'm behind on this, but my recent find was Canva for image creation.
That's Canva, Canva, for those of you.
Right. It's super cool. And now I see how to use it, and it's all these little images with the text, and you can quote things and stuff like that, and you can put your own images. I could see my kids use Adobe Spark in the classroom for some of the same stuff that we could do with Canva, and there's also the app for the phone, and it was super easy. So we played around with that, both of us. We played around with it and created little
and just to give you a little more detail
Go
here,
ahead.
what you might use this for. Canva gives you templates for if you are wanting to add a graphic to Facebook. You choose the Facebook option, and it's already sized and has templates you can use to just replace pictures and words. If you want to send something out on Twitter as a graphic, they have a Twitter template. If you want to do something for Instagram, whatever you're trying to use, they have a template for, and you just change pictures, change words, and then you just hit the share button.
You can change the color. It was super easy, and the fonts to match with what you're saying.
And then you just hit the share button, and then share it to whatever social media. You can message somebody, email it, save it, whatever you need to do to use it, and it's easy. Use it in your classroom. You can make posters. If you're having kids graphically explain something they've learned in class, you need them to create a poster, you want them to create a meme, any of that kind of stuff would be fantastic with Canva. What the biggest difference between Canva and Adobe Spark, I will say, Adobe Spark, if you're you have to create an account. Students have to say they're over 13 to create an account with Adobe Spark. If you're a middle school or elementary school teacher, that's a problem, because I taught 6th grade and my kids weren't over 13. So what do? You have them use Canva. Canva also has teacher and student accounts. So I created a teacher account, and I can create a classroom in Canva and connect it to my Google Classroom. And now I can do assignments using Canva for my students, and I can see those connected to my Google Classroom. So all fantastic things about Canva.
And on our last episode, we addressed the use of memes in the classroom and how I used it toward the end of the year, and my only regret was that I had not used it sooner, because it was a fantastic way to get some feedback from your students and to see things completely different than what you see, because they have their own outlook on things. And so Canva would be an easy way to do that as well.
All right, so what is our show about today?
We're talking about classroom management in the technology-infused classroom. So, how does classroom management change in the technology-infused classroom?
Now, I read this question
because
we do our show notes ahead of time, so it kind of helps us plan our show. And Carrie had written down, how does classroom management change in a technology-infused classroom? And I wrote, it doesn't. Exclamation point. It doesn't. And then I just said, what works for managing a classroom works regardless of technology integration. So the first thing we want to say is good classroom management does not require technology. And even with technology, it's the same steps that you need to go through, whether you have using technology or not, to manage your classroom. And here's what some of those are.
Right. Well, the first thing is you have to set those expectations on day one. You cannot waver from those. But day one, when you go through your routine classroom procedures of, raising your hand to talk if that's what you do, or what for leaving the classroom, what the procedure is for closing the classroom. We have all of these steps figured out ahead of time. And the only thing that I would say that you have to do from there is to say, okay, when we're using Chromebooks, laptops, whatever your device is, iPads, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to store them. This is how we're going to get them out. This is how we're going to make sure that you're on where you're supposed to be, when the lid's supposed to be closed or it's supposed to be on sleep, and you just address those things. Otherwise, it's just your regular classroom procedures that you do, but you have to start from the first day, just like everything else.
Not only is it important to set those procedures and expectations, you must be consistent in enforcing your procedures. So you're going to spend the first 2-3 weeks of class reminding students what your procedures and expectations are and enforcing them. A wise person once told me, you must inspect what you expect.
Right.
And so if you tell people this is what I expect and then you don't make them do it, they won't do it.
Right.
Students will learn quickly. What do they really mean? Do they really mean I have to do this? Are they checking for this? And you know those teachers that you walk down the hall and they're not enforcing the dress code, so kids don't always have their shirt tucked in, or they don't feel like they have to act the way they do in your class and other teachers' classrooms. So if you are expecting students to use technology and you require them to use it and you hold them to those expectations, they will meet those expectations. And it every year I run into someone who says, well, your kids know how to use technology because you use technology in the classroom, but mine won't even bring their laptop, or half of them don't have a laptop in class. Well, that's because day one I said, we will use technology every day in my class. It is a requirement. You must have your charged device. And guess what? After a couple of weeks, those kids know I better have my device in Mr. Wall's class. And maybe 2 kids would not have a device the whole day, and that's because they were at the help desk or something was wrong with it, and they would just use one of my desktops in the room. So if you expect kids to use technology and you actually use it in a meaningful way, they will make sure they have their technology in your class.
Right. And that's just, I mean, as with any classroom procedure, is about being consistent.
And let's talk about for a second before we move into this next section on this. A lot of teachers are concerned, well, if we use technology in my classroom, kids are going to do things they shouldn't do. They're going to go to websites they shouldn't be on.
That's their first concern.
They're going to look at videos, play games. You might bring in bullying on social media, or maybe they're chatting with each other, or heaven forbid they search something inappropriate and now you're getting called into the office. Same thing applies. If you didn't have technology, that student might be passing a paper note to chat with their friends or just talking. What do you do in those situations? You enforce your classroom rules.
Right.
Same thing with technology. If you don't monitor what your students are doing already, you're not doing the right thing in your classroom. So, of course, good teachers monitor what's happening in their classroom without technology. So even if students are taking out a laptop, you still have to monitor the classroom.
Right. Even before a teacher will say, the technology doesn't work or something like that, the first thing they say is, well, what if they're going to something they shouldn't? They're going to do something they shouldn't. I mean, they're kids. And in our case, we work with middle school kids, which is even more so. But again, if you enforce your classroom procedures, then
this is your opportunity to teach them the right way to use it.
Right. And
that's your job.
To be that model, you show them through examples. And, I have my kids, because they know I'm going to enforce my classroom procedures, and someone will always say, what happens if they go where they're not supposed to? I give them on day one, on those regular classroom procedures, I will give you one warning. Do not be where you're not supposed to be, or where I have instructed you to go, and things like that. And they get one warning. That's your free. And after that, I'm going to enforce some rules. And they know. So I may have a student. This past school year, I never had a student be where they weren't supposed to be. Before that, I may have maybe twice a year have to take things a step further to say something about a student not being where they're supposed to be. They know I'm there. They also know I'm walking around. I'm never at my desk. I'm always walking around checking and doing and seeing what they're doing. Even when they're not facing me as well, I'm checking to see that they're doing what they're supposed to. So it does require you as the teacher to be up and monitoring and things like that. But my kids know Ms. Wall is not going to put up with this. And so maybe twice a year, I have a student where I have to go a little bit further than just saying something to them, because they don't. They know what I expect, and they meet those expectations.
And then a final thing we'll say about the procedures and expectations is build relationships with your students. And all good teachers know that as you build relationships, students tend to act better in the classroom. They don't do the things they know they're not supposed to do because you care about them. They begin to care about you. You build those relationships, and you have less behavior problems in your classroom and more on-task students. And when you do have to have that conversation, if you've taken the time to build those relationships, those conversations go a lot better for you and the student.
And classroom management and teaching within a technology enriched environment, students are less likely to act out because this is something they enjoy. And of course, we want that technology to be meaningful and where they are actually learning and doing investigating of their own. But it reduces the number of problems that you have in your classroom as well. And you've got to keep them on task and keep them moving.
Well, let's talk about some tools. Even though you do have expectations and procedures, we want teachers to know there are some tools you can use to aid in classroom management. So some technology that may help you monitor and manage your classroom. Let's start with one of our favorites we used, especially in the middle school classroom, is Class Dojo. If you've never used Class Dojo, you basically input all of your students for each class, and you can pull that up on your screen at the front of the class, and it lists all your kids, and it gives them a little monster looking character, different, it's not a real picture, it's a little character with their name on it, and it allows you to catch your students doing something good. And when you do, if they're on task, if they're helping someone else, you can award them points to kind of give them a positive behavior support in your classroom. Oh, you were doing what you were supposed to, you earned a point. And then when you give them the point, the whole class sees it, award them those points. And so it's kind of a positive motivator for the correct behavior and the correct actions in your classroom.
And I'm going to say this because we have a variety of educators that listen. They're in all different stages. Some are elementary, some are high school, and we're in middle school. But Class Dojo, it looks, when the first time I saw this years ago, it looked very kiddie to me. And I thought, my middle school students are going to laugh at this. They love their little monster. They love to see their name on the screen. They love when they're doing the right thing and you catch them. Plus, there's the app for your phone. So I walk around, I had my phone in my hand, and I just awarded Jared a point because he was on task and he was following directions. And it pops up and has Jared was following directions, and everybody could see it. And they like that.
It's also great for gamifying your classroom.
Right, which is something we're going to get
students
to in a future episode. But I used it in regards to gamification in my classroom, not only to reinforce them with classroom management.
And one thing we will caution you can do negative consequences and take points. You don't want to do that. You don't want that on the screen and doing that in front of students. So I would use it for positive reinforcement. There are some legal ramifications to using it in a negative manner in front of everybody. So focus on the positive in your classroom. It's a great way to boost the environment and the attitude in your classroom.
Right. Another way to monitor what your students are doing is we use Google. We use Google Sheets, Google Slides, Google Docs. All of that is collaborative, so you can watch them in real time on your screen while they are working as well. So that's an easy...
You want to know if they're on task?
Right.
Watch them do the work. My kids know if I assign them something, when I'll open I'll open a tab for every student that's working, and my little... we're the Wildcats at our school. My little Wildcat logo will pop up on top of their screen, and they know I better be busy because Mr. Wall's probably watching this. And then every once in a while, I'll give them some feedback, whether it's you're doing this well, keep this up, or maybe go look at this, do it differently. But just those little things while class is going on keeps those students on task.
On task, right. There's also there's web apps. We talked in a previous episode about Lightspeed Relay that is available. That's a web app. It's completely web-based for you to monitor what your students are doing if they're on portable devices such as iPads, laptops, Chromebooks, things like that. I know that there's Dino.
Yes, I used Dino at a previous school, and it lets you, basically it captures your students' IPs and lets you see all of their screens at one time. On yours, you can shut down and you can shut down their computer, lock it down and send them a message if they're not doing the right thing. It was kind of hit or miss. Students could get around it by using VPNs and things like that. So it wasn't always effective, but most of the time it did the job.
Now, I teach, there's the computer labs, or I teach in a computer classroom. So my students all have desktops, and of course, they don't go anywhere. Now, they have Chromebooks that they pack around school, but in my room, we don't use those, and they go straight to the desktops because I am a computer class. In there, I use Land School, and you have to install it, so it couldn't be on a Chromebook or anything, but you use Land School, and Land School does the same thing. I can have every screen for every student on my one screen. They know that I'm watching them. Now, I walk around the room so much, and I stand at the back of my room a lot, so I don't have Land School up all the time, but they don't know that. And so it's connected with my teacher account, and all those computers in the classroom have Land School installed on them. And it allows me, I can remote control, I can do chat, which is probably the feature that I use the most, would be the chat feature, not just to monitor, but I can do screenshots. So if there is that one student who's not where they're supposed to, they've got their warning, I have my screenshot to document, and it's just another way for a teacher to have access to what's going on and to follow what their students are doing to keep your classroom management procedures in check.
All right, so we've covered some tools you can use to help with your monitoring of your classroom, to help manage that classroom. But remember, as far as managing a classroom goes, what works in a non-technology classroom works in a technology classroom. Set those expectations and procedures. As in regards to technology, some great things to make sure you set as policies or procedures in your classroom are that device needs to be charged before you come to school every day. Bring it charged. Number 2, carry it with 2 hands so that you don't drop it and abuse it. Do not put stickers and try to customize it directly on there. Get a case and then customize a case so you don't mess up the device. Make sure you only allow students to go places that you have okayed for them to go. And if you just put in a few simple procedures like that, it'll just do wonders for managing your classroom in regards to the actual technology aspect. But as far as managing a classroom that has technology in it, you got to do the same things. You got to walk around. You got to watch what kids are doing. You got to build those relationships and enforce your policies and procedures.
From day one.
From day one.
From day one.
Well,
yes.
We hope that this has been informative for you. We've enjoyed bringing it to you in our new setup. And for Carrie, this is Jared Wall with Wall Ed Tech, and we'd like to say goodbye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to Wall to Wall Podcast. You can get all of our podcasts by subscribing to Wall to Wall Podcast on iTunes. For more resources, visit walledtech.com. You can follow us on Twitter or find us on Facebook. Just search for Wall Ed Tech. If you have questions, comments, or things you want us to talk about, visit Wall Ed Tech and send us an email, tweet, or message us on Facebook. We look forward to hearing from you.